Hello and welcome to Ghouls, Ghosts, and Goblins. I am the man in the beaver hat, joined
And
by Tom.
hi, folks. Howdy ho.
How are you doing in this lovely night?
I'm doing pretty good. I just got done doing one stream, and during that stream, I ended up on a phone call with someone and helping them out with some things. And yeah, I'm doing great.
So tonight, in light of not having our show tonight because we got canceled on the last second, I decided that wouldn't it be great if I actually had a review of the movie whose character I've been dressing up as for the entire series? And I thought that'd be really cool. And isn't it even funnier that it is a lost film, very sadly? Lost on August 10th, 1965, in the Vault 7 fire at Universal Studios backlot in Hollywood.
Really? Was it 65? Because I read it was 67.
I think it was 65, or maybe it was 67. See, 50, I thought it was 65.
And also, this film has a gruesome background to it as well.
Well, I'm glad that's why you're here, because you know all this fun stuff about these films. Yes, it was lost in the, what was the name of that fire? Yeah, the 1965 MGM Vault fire. August 10th, at the MGM, or actually it's the MGM Studios backlot, now Sony Pictures in Culver City, my mistake, because I was Universal. Caused by an electrical short that ignited flammable stored nitrate film. The initial explosion reportedly killed at least one person, and the resulting fire destroyed the entire contents of the vault, which included archived prints of silent and early sound films produced by MGM and its predecessors. The only known copies of hundreds of films were destroyed. That is very sad, and why, as much as I love physical media, it is important to have all old movies today backed up on digital files elsewhere, and for us to buy physical media so we can preserve it for future generations.
Yes, very much. Very much.
So this film was directed by Todd Browning, famous for directing Dracula in 1931 with Bela Lugosi. He would go on to make Freaks in 1930.
One of us. One of us.
He even remade this film as a sound film with Bela Lugosi called Mark of the Vampire in 1935. But this one was an original story by him also, which was pretty interesting.
I thought I had this movie because you said London After Dark. I'm like, wait, do I have this? And I had to look at my Universal collection, and I was, nope, Werewolves. I think it was Werewolves in London or something like that. Like, nope, that's not the movie. But reading up on it, how it's not available anywhere, but there is a special way that they have it.
Yes.
Now, which is a very odd way.
Yes, in 2002, Turner Classic Movies collected a bunch of stills from this film. I don't know where they got these stills, because it's not just like publicity stills, it's like actual frozen shots from the movie, so I don't know where they came from. And they assembled a 46-minute edit. They included new dialogue and title cards that they dressed up in, old-timey effects to make it look authentic, so they could retell the story, basically. And I actually just watched it for the first time, and I was like, I thought it wasn't going to be very, engaging, but it actually was. I'm like, wow, they did a pretty good job at this, and they didn't even put an orchestral score on it, despite that, like most silent films have that, and this one did not. Again, because this was just a still image recreation. Oh, we are joined by viewers tonight. Lemon Pie. Holy cow! At this hour, I thought it was a mistake. Hi, Cat. Yes, hello, Lemon Pie. And he says hello to Tom. Very good.
Hello, Lemon Pie.
We're also joined by the Dead Man. Hello there. Thank you for coming. Says he heard that a werewolf was sighted in Soho in the rain. Indeed. So, for those who don't know, this film starred Lon Chaney, master of disguise. What was unique about this film for Lon Chaney is that, unlike some of his other classics like Phantom of the Opera, he's actually playing like a dual role in this movie. So you get to see Lon Chaney, like without any makeup for a big bulk of it, playing the role of Inspector Burke. And that makes it like doubly sad that we don't have any existing footage from this film. But he also plays, the man in the beaver hat. Spoilers. So, yeah.
But the big thing for this movie, it was 1927 when it came out, and I guess I don't know. Would it be a spoiler if I said what the thing is around this movie? Is that
It,
it has to deal with suicide, and
yeah,
for the 20s, that's insane because you would have thought back then they were very, very tight about what you can and can't do in film.
yes. So the film begins with the death of Roger Balfour, and Inspector Burke is called to the scene to investigate at the manor, and everybody thinks he ended his own life. There's a suicide note which says, "I am ending my own life. Forgive me, Lucille." And the inspector is convinced from this note that, oh, well, it must be suicide because the note says so. But they don't dust for fingerprints. He doesn't really ask anybody else. The neighbors are suspicious, but they leave it at that. 5 years later, there's a mysterious, fiendish, vampiric man in a beaver hat with bulging eyes and sharp vampire teeth and long claw-like fingernails, who is with this pale-skinned vampire woman, and they want to lease the house. And for some reason, there are these two real estate agents in charge of the house who are there outside in the courtyard. Beautiful courtyard, by the way. I don't know if this was a facade they built on the back lot, but it has like a massive fountain with all these beautiful plants. And the real estate guys tell them, well, if you want to lease this place, then the owner's not going to pay for any repairs because it's been abandoned for 5 years now since Balfour's death. But they sign the lease anyway, and they're like, okay. And when Balfour's daughter, Lucille, finds out that, oh, there's people living in my house, and this man, one of her suitors, Arthur Hibbs, finds out, he thinks that's odd, as does Arthur Hibbs' uncle, Sir James. And so they decide to call Inspector Burke back to find out what the deal is with these weirdos who have moved into the house without, repairing it or renovating it or nothing. And so the inspector comes around, and we see that there's the mysterious man in the beaver hat and the vampire woman stalking the grounds, and that's very odd. But Mr. Hibbs and the inspector, they don't believe in vampires, and Mr. Hamlin doesn't, and everybody's kind of suspicious and not really sure what's going on. And Hamlin's like, well, how do you explain this? And he produces the suicide note, which was in the possession of the inspector, and he also presents the new signature on the lease for the real estate signed by Roger Balfour, who's been dead for 5 years. And so they're like, it must be a vampire, a zombie back from the dead. And Sir James says the only way he will be convinced that it is not a zombie is if they go and check Roger Balfour's crypt. So the inspector takes them up on it, and they go there at night, and they find that the crypt is empty. And they're kind of suspicious on that, and they go back to the house. They live next door to Balfour's old house where, Lucille, the daughter, lives next door. And the inspector is again talking with, Lucille and the inspector, and the inspector's talking with Lucille and Arthur Hibbs and his uncle, Sir James, trying to figure out, well, do the dead walk the earth again? Are these vampires? Like, what's going on? And the maid comes in, rushing in to recall this terrifying event, that she was stalked by the man in the beaver hat in the house just moments ago. We see like a flashback sequence of her telling the story where you get the famous picture of him like raising up his hands and his eyes, and I don't have it on mine, but he had bat wings sticking out because of course vampires take the form of bats. And he's terrorizing her apparently because she's the maid, and he's trying to get to Lucille for some reason. And she's like, oh, I fainted, he must have ran off. And they're like, see, the vampires are real. And the inspector's still not convinced. He looks out the window and he sees the vampires again. And so they just come up with a plan to protect Lucille, and they go through the typical things you do to protect people from vampires. Like, not I guess typical. They put a rosary outside her door with a sword jammed through it to try and protect it. And Arthur Hibbs is like, see, Inspector, you must believe in vampires for you not really thinking about it. And the inspector, who suspects that these tenants have taken up residence here, and the fact that they're imitating Roger's signature makes him think that maybe they killed Roger for the sake of like stealing the house, stealing the house from him to lease it from him. And so the inspector is suspicious as to whether Arthur Hibbs and his uncle, Sir James, have anything to do with this, and they resent the accusation. Oh, they won't have any of this. But they decide, well, let's go look next door for ourselves. So the inspector and Sir James go next door, spying on the old mansion, and they see Roger Balfour himself with the man in the beaver hat and the vampire woman inside the main, living room inside the old dilapidated house. And they freak out. And so the inspector and Arthur run back to the mansion. And this is where the inspector decides he thinks that he thinks that he thinks initially Sir James might be innocent, but he's not sure about his nephew. So he hypnotizes the nephew into thinking it's 5 years earlier, the night of Roger's murder, or night of Roger's death, because the inspector believes that a killer will reenact their crime when hypnotized. But to his disappointment, Arthur Hibbs does not reenact any type of crime. He just kind of fell asleep while somebody snuck into Sir James's room and tried to kill him, but it didn't work because Sir James wasn't in the room. He had the inspector made sure to have one of his other assistants there, protected, and so he decides to try this trick again. This time he lures Sir James out to the manor because Sir James is like, I'm done with this crazy hypnosis. I don't believe in this crap. I'm going to run next door. I'm going to confront these vampires. And he goes to confront them, runs across the man in the beaver hat. And this time the man in the beaver hat is the one who hypnotizes him into thinking it's 5 years earlier. And to his great surprise, he goes into the manor where he sees the Roger Balfour zombie. And he asks Roger for his daughter's hand in marriage. And he says, no, I'll never agree to that. So then he comes back, so then he leaves. And the maid from the house tells the inspector as they were watching, see, you were wrong. Sir James didn't kill him. But then hours later, Sir James returns, and he points a gun at the zombie of Roger Balfour and says, oh, you're going to write what I tell you to write, and makes him write the suicide note. But of course, the gun is not loaded. And then Sir James, the inspector rushes in with the police, and they arrest him. They say, aha, you killed him. And he snaps out of the trance, and the reveal is that the inspector was the one who was dressed up as the man in the beaver hat. And another one of his assistants was the vampire woman. And they figured if they tricked him into thinking Lucille was in danger, then if he truly was in love with her, because the inspector suspected what this had to do with. He just didn't know if it was the uncle who had the hots for her or if it was the nephew. But he figured if they think she's in danger, they're going to do whatever it is to save her. And if you can trick them into believing there's vampires around, that would make them susceptible to hypnosis, apparently. And so that's how that's all revealed. And apparently the daughter had suspected murder all along and had been the one who convinced him to go through with this scheme. And so the guy's hauled off to jail. The inspector forgives the nephew for troubling him. He's like, I didn't know if it was you or your uncle. And so the nephew gets to live happily ever after with Lucille. And the inspector's assistant jokes with the butler that, we probably could have made more money if we worked in the actual theater for a month instead of doing this. But she's like, I had a lot of fun. And that's like the end of the movie. But the way I explained
I'm surprised they haven't done a remake of this movie.
They did, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the way I just explained it made a lot more sense than the film, because they do not explain in the end what the logic is as to why did he dress up as vampires, who knew about this, why was this going on. And at one point, he even had a double as the man in the beaver hat for when the inspector couldn't be the one in the costume, and the Roger Balfour zombie was another guy who was just a lookalike. So they're going through all these machinations just to try and find out who killed Roger, and why they waited 5 years to do this, I don't know. But because it's a silent film and there wasn't as much dialogue title cards, and they didn't have flashbacks at the end like you would in a modern thriller with a twist, it wasn't really clear what the story was. But it was just, which is probably why Todd Browning, it was very successful though. This was the most successful film that Todd Browning and Lon Chaney made together. They made a few. And it was very successful, even though the critics gave it middling reviews. But Todd did remake it as a sound film in 1935 with the only change to the story was that instead of the inspector dressing up as the man in the beaver hat, it was Bela Lugosi, the occultist who they hire. But he's not in the beaver hat. He kind of just looks like a Dracula knockoff because it's Bela Lugosi. And because it was a sound film, they had a lot more dialogue to make it very clear to the audience what was going on. So it was much more cohesive and easy to understand. But even Bela Lugosi thought it was a very weird story. It's like all the jumping through hoops and everything that the inspector is doing to try and solve this years after. It's a little kooky. But I do agree with you, Tom. They should. I think it would be cool if they remade this, kind of like what Roger Eggers is doing with Nosferatu, coming out in December.
As a matter of fact, in 1927, some magazines referred to this film as The Hypnotist.
Yes.
But here's a fascinating piece. This is what blows my mind, is that if you watch this film or seen pictures from it, Lon Chaney has these teeth in it, and he wore these elaborate teeth applications for the character, but they hurt so much in use he could only stand for a few minutes at a time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of like Richard Keel with Jaws with the steel teeth. You can only have them in for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and so also, it has been said that the look created by Lon Chaney as the vampire-like character unhinged the mind of a young male cinema goer to the extent that he murdered his girlfriend not long after seeing the film.
Oh,
The killer used Lon Chaney's makeup as his main line of defense during the trial, but the court didn't believe him. The court judge didn't believe him.
oh wow, that's So either the movie drove him crazy, or he was just trying to blame the movie and was going to kill his girlfriend anyway.
So I mean, and so he decided to use Lon Chaney's makeup, which, for most people don't know, Lon Chaney was one of the greatest self makeup artists of all time, as well as an actor. And I believe he also had his own brand of makeup for people to do. If they wanted to try their own makeup appliances and stuff. And that's where that defense came from. And if you really want to get deep into Lon Chaney's life, it's The Man of 1,000 Faces. And I believe Arrow Video puts it out, and it's an amazing movie just to see his life from a young man up till when he dies, and seeing what he went through. Because he was not someone who you would think was happy-go-lucky. He struggled to keep his son. He had to deal with his wife leaving him, and I guess she had a mental problem as well. It's a lot of screwy things happened in his life. And then sadly, when he got cancer, towards the end, he gave the makeup to his son, and his son adopted the name Lon Chaney Jr. He put the Jr. on his name. Because I don't think that was his Lon Chaney Jr.'s real name.
His real name is Creighton.
Right, and then Lon Chaney Jr. ended up becoming an alcoholic later in life.
Yeah. Speaking of him doing his own makeup, the dead man says he also saw Lon Chaney walking with the Queen. His hair was perfect. I would imagine so. Let's see. Oh, Lemon Pie says, I just thought the hat was your personal style. Well, it kind of is. This is February last year, but
I didn't think that those were called a beaver hat. I thought those were called top hats. But I guess beaver hat is another term for
it? I guess. And I have no idea why it's called beaver hat. It might be a difference because, like, top hats might be a little narrower. I'm really not sure.
Unless it's made of beaver.
It might be. Yeah, this one has the nice white interior. But I get the hair for this as well.
If only I had a thing called the internet. Oh, by the way, the character played by Lon Chaney Jr., the main character's likeness, inspired the scary creature in the Babadook.
It did. That's true. Yeah, the Babadook. Yeah. He looks just like it with the silhouette. The Dead Man Jr., damn it, I screwed up. Actually, you didn't, Dead Man, because before his father died, Lon Chaney Jr. was already using his father's stage name as or his father's name as his own stage name, Lon Chaney. And then after his father died, that's when he added the Junior. Or no, he was called Junior before then. That's right. It was reversed. So he called himself Lon Chaney Jr. while his father was still alive. But after his father died on August 26, 1930, that's when he dropped Junior from his name and would go by Lon Chaney. But today, all historians, everybody refer to him as Lon Chaney Jr. Of course, famously went on to star in The Wolfman in 1941.
Yeah, he's the Wolfman, and then at one point he actually played Frankenstein.
He did, and I know he was very upset that when the Universal remade Phantom of the Opera as a sound film in 1943, that they didn't even consider him for the role of Eric the Phantom, which in that film was played by Claude Rains. And he's like, well, the role my father originated, I should have done it, and that kind of thing. Another sad thing about Lon Chaney Sr. was that I can't remember what movie he was working on, but you know how fake snow back then was like asbestos or just this.
Yeah, that's what caused the cancer, I believe.
It did, and it exacerbated it because it started as like an infection that led to pneumonia, and then this snow stuff just exacerbated it, and there was nothing they could do, and he died at the age of 47.
As a matter of fact, there's a great scene in The Man of 1,000 Faces where Lon Chaney wants to get this role. He badly wants to get a role, and so he says, well, I can look like a man with a clubbed foot. Like, no, you can't. And he does it. And he does it so perfectly Like, wait, how did you do that? And that's how he got the role. Like the things that he would do with makeup and with his own body
Yeah.
blew people away. I mean, this is someone really today. We don't have anyone that can do that today.
No.
Well, I mean, the only thing like makeup wise would be whoever does the makeup for Colin Farrell and the Penguin, because you don't
Right?
even know that's Colin Farrell.
But he's not even putting it on himself, though.
No, but like you don't really see many people doing that
Right.
much, unless you're in a small independent film.
Yeah.
But all right, so here is the answer to tonight's question: why are top hats called beaver hats? And this is literally what it says: Enter the beaver. The first top hats were made from beaver felt and required long and complex processing. The beaver pelts were imported from North America, where they were processed using mercury, which often led to those in the felt making industry suffering from mercury poisoning. Hence the term Mad Hatters.
That is very unique. That is great. So the man in the beaver hat did become the Mad Hatter of Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
Or of the Batman, more likely. Batman universe, more likely. The dark side of that.
Right. It's. I mean, I think today this movie would do really well today if they did it right. You could probably pull off a version of this. I think Robert Eggers could probably do it.
Yes. Oh, for sure he could. The dead man says the poppy scene from The Wizard of Oz had asbestos that apparently didn't affect the actors. That's true. All the poppies and the snow and everything was falling on was all asbestos. And it was shocking how much of it they got in there. Because I know regarding that film, the original actor they cast to play the Tin Man.
Yeah, Buddy Ebsen of the Beverly Hillbillies. And
he got really sick because of they were using a different type of mercury paint that just was awful. And then when he got hospitalized for weeks, they had to replace him. And they realized when they found out what caused it, they had to change the makeup around. And Buddy Ebsen was just cynical about that the rest of his life. That damn movie. Because he did have complications that were long-lasting, sadly, as a result of that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, nowadays, you really the only makeup artists you hear about are Tom Savini,
yes,
and Rick Baker, but you don't really hear about any modern. I mean, probably you give it a few years, and whoever did the makeup for Colin Farrell, that person will become known for what they've done with makeup.
Yeah,
but you really don't hear that much about the makeup industry, and that's why a lot of those films, you look at them now, like the old Universal films, you're like, how is this scary? But you got to put yourself in the mind frame of people back then who have never seen Frankenstein or Dracula up on the big screen like that, and that's why they had to put up all those what do you call those things, the disclaimers about them.
Well, yeah, that's why when Lon Chaney first gets unmasked as Phantom of the Opera in 1925, people were fainting, and they had these little salt sprays available in the theater to help revive people who fainted.
As a matter of fact, the closest thing to people fainting in the theater would be, from what I'm hearing, and I don't know how true it is, people are seeing Terrifier 3, and they're walking out within the first 5 or 10 minutes of that film because of how gruesome it is. There are people passing out and puking. And there are people like, if you have an ailment or something like that, or if something's bothering you like that, come tell our staff, because we got people on staff that know how to deal with this stuff, medical issues. So, like, I think nowadays people try to make things as scary as they can be, but in a way you haven't seen it. Whereas back then is what they were doing. That's what everybody always does. Like, I always count The Conjuring as one of the greatest modern horror movies because there's not that much gore, but it's all based on sound. And what you hear in the sound, you think about it and your mind goes to a place where you don't want it to go. And you think, okay, what could that be? What exactly is going on here? And I call it the greatest psychological film ever, doing something like that, because you're playing with sound in such a way that they don't really do it that much anymore.
Yeah, sort of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It uses editing to make you think you're seeing a bloodbath and you're really not.
Right.
And makeup, as far as other iconic makeup lately, would be whoever did the makeup for The Green Knight, because that wasn't like a
it looked like wood
costume. Yeah, and his whole face and everything, that was all legit. And that was like, man, that is really impressive, you know?
You know, I haven't watched that in a while. I gotta throw that one back on at some point because that's a very weird movie. But then again, it's A24, so you get what you don't expect.
And speaking of Lon Chaney, his he had the very same makeup case throughout all of his career.
Yeah,
and
took it with him everywhere.
Everywhere. And it actually appears in London After Midnight, the only time it's ever on screen. In the very penultimate scene when the inspector, when he reveals who that he's the one in the Man in the Beaver Hat, and you see the makeup case open with all his fixings in there for it. And that was really neat. That they're like, yeah, just have your regular makeup case on set, it'd be great. And it's like, man, that is so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that they taken this film, and as a matter of fact, they are still trying to find prints, things from this film. It's still the most sought after. They're trying to put more of it together. As of 2019, they were still looking for more ways to do it.
It inspired a band. It inspired Cooper picked this for his hat, other songs. And it's funny, it does speak to the power of a still image, because having just watched the reconstruction of the film, the Man in the Beaver Hat is in it for maybe 10 minutes of that 46. A few scenes. He's not really big in the climax. And again, the story is engaging mystery, but doesn't tie up really well. And the fact that was the only extant copy tells you that it wasn't the most popular movie, because otherwise, usually when these things happen, there are other copies in movie theaters or whatever that turn up. For instance, a few years ago, a German TV station of all places had the uncut version of Psycho that they got from a local theater, and that's how Universal found out that, we've been putting the wrong version out, the edited for TV version out on home media for all these years.
Right.
It's crazy, but it's funny that the power of a still image, to see those shots of Lon Chaney in the costume from London After Midnight. And I don't even know how he did that makeup, because it looks so good. If you look closely at his eyes, you can see that he has actual wires that are holding the fake eyebrows of his skin wide open to make it look like the eyes are bulging, even though you can see his eyelids underneath it. But you can see the metal piercings along the side holding the whatever makeup he's using around the pallor of his face. That's really, and that's, again, man, putting wires up in your eyes like that. That's great.
That's like full on Clockwork Orange there. But but you know what? You gotta put yourself in their shoes. Like, what would Lon Chaney think of, if he was around now? Let's say he had the chance to be around now, and someone went to him and said, "Look, we show your movies, we show your son's movies." And I wonder if he would be touched, or why would you show this? And then someone goes, well, let us show you what the horror films of our day are like. Mm-hmm. That would probably kill him.
Oh, yeah. Too much CGI, a lot of emphasis on gore rather than, what monsters or characters. And so it's like, he was a real performer. I love that. Because again, you can't think of another time that happened, or the actors actually putting that much thought into it and just put in charge of coming up with a design for the character. And on top of that, he's applying all the makeup himself.
He came from a vaudeville background. That's where he started out, and then he got into movies. And
that's right. There was a scandal with his first wife and her eventually taking her own life, and the whole scandal, and then that basically ran him out of the theater, and so he went to work for Hollywood, which came to the benefit of all of us.
Which, by the way, folks, and I really highly recommend you go out there and get that movie, Man of a Thousand Faces. It is generally one of the most compelling films you will watch. And James Cagney, who plays Lon Chaney, he's great in it.
Yeah. See, the Dead Man says, "Oh God, I watched The Curse of La Llorona, which is part of the Conjuring universe, and it was so bad. I admit The Conjuring is good, Tom."
Yeah, that first Conjuring movie, like I said, it is one of the greatest psychological suspense films, because it all plays with sound.
Yeah,
and until you get to the end of that, to where you get your people being possessed and whatnot, then it becomes a bit like a modern horror movie in a way, but it definitely has that feeling of something from the late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Yes.
You know, it's sort of like, it's like what I say about Malignant. People go, well, that's not a great movie. But you got to look at it this way. There are three stages to, like, there are three acts in that film. The first act is, what is up with this dialogue? It's like cheesy 1980s dialogue. I don't know why I'm watching this. Then you get to the second act, which is the middle of the movie. You're like, okay, what am I looking at here? What's going on? And then you get to the third part, and then you're like, holy crap, this is insane. I can't believe this is, I'm watching this. So it really, it sucks you in a way that you're not expecting.
Yeah.
Which I love about movies that do that. You know, when you think, oh, I know where this is going, but by the time you get to the end of it, you don't know where it's taking you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the fantastic things I love when a filmmaker can do that.
Yeah. The Dead Man says The Conjuring, The Conjuring 2, and The Nun are the only movies worth of crap in that universe.
Yeah, the Nun 2 was a bit hit and miss. I do admit that. It was okay.
I like the atmosphere and the setting of that film, though.
It was okay, but I mean, yeah, it is what it is, I guess, you know. And I'm supposing once the Conjuring, they do the final Conjuring film, maybe all the things wrap up, all the characters come out or whatnot. I mean, I can definitely say, I think the ending of the final Conjuring film is going to be with the husband dying, because that's where it leads to. Because the husband died young, I know that. Well, not young, but I know that. And as a matter of fact, the Warrens, they're buried not that far from me, probably about like an hour and 45 minutes from me.
Mm.
And then once a year, around Halloween, they open up that basement for one night. Mm. You can look around the museum, that they have there of everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I agree that a movie like this would be fun to remake, but add a little bit more horror to it, you know, tension and suspense or something. Like for instance, John Carpenter's original Halloween is built on tension and suspense, not body count and blood, guts, and gore like a lot of the sequels.
Right.
Same with his remake of The Thing, which is, again, a movie filled with tension and suspense and paranoia. And I love how both Halloween and The Thing have sort of fatalistic endings, because
it's sort of like Alien. Alien is the same thing, built up on suspense. As a matter of fact, you were saying that you only see Lon Chaney in the movie for what, 7 minutes?
Well, something, I mean, as the man in the beaver hat portion of it, for like maybe 2 minutes or so. Because this movie was short anyway. It was only 69 minutes upon release. And
right. Well, the thing about it is that, like, if you think about the movie Beetlejuice, the original one,
right,
you think, oh, Michael Keaton's in it a lot. But if you add up the time, every scene he's in, he's only in it for about 6-7 minutes, maybe almost 9.
Yeah, because they tease him with these brief shots in the first half, but he doesn't show up proper as a character until past the halfway point.
Right, and that's how you do a good film like that. You tease that character, just like with Alien. You tease that character.
And what I love about those horror films as well is, again, the fatalistic endings. Like in Halloween, it's like, yeah, Dr. Loomis saves Laurie, but the shape gets away after getting shot 6 times, and it's like, where did he go? And then, you know, The Thing, it's like, John Carpenter says there is an answer to the question about whether McCready or Childs is the Thing, and that there is enough clues that you could figure it out. To date, no one has figured out for certain, but that's also a fatalistic ending. It's like, what are you going to do? You know, you're just stuck there. And I like that horror has those types of endings. Like, notably, Halloween 3, which I got on the shelf, Season of the Witch, where it's like a story that chases its own tail type story. And at the end, it's like, oh, this warlock's going to succeed in massacring all the children throughout the world, and there's nothing our hero can do to stop it. But I love dark endings for a horror film. You shouldn't be cheering on your way out. It should be like, oh, gosh, that was horrifying, you know?
You know, like I look at A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a film about really a pedophile, if you put it down to it. And yet people are like, I'm going to be Freddy for Halloween. And it's like, you're going to be a pedophile for Halloween? Great. You know, it wonderful. I'm dressing up my son to be like Freddy. Okay, get him on the line there. But, you know, I'll tell you this, is that the newest thing I've seen now is that they're taking, like, Nightmare on Elm Street, they taken that title of Elm Street, and on Max, there's a show called The Real Murders on Elm Street,
Yeah.
which I've started watching. That's fantastic. There's a second one called Cabin in the Woods. That's along the same lines.
Yeah, but the thing about the Elm Street as well, I think the reason people kind of forget that Freddy is a child molester is because that's only really mentioned by the mother in one scene, and when she explains who he was and why the parents killed him, and it's like, man, that's really dark, but the movie doesn't really lean into that, and the sequels don't either. It's like you kind of forget, because they in the sequels they play him up as almost like a joke or a party trick, which is why the original, I'd say, is still the best and the only one where I pre-ordered the 4K coming out on the 15th, the Steelbook version, and but that's also like a fatalistic ending, because it's like Freddy's sort of still there, even though he's kind of not, but he is, and I like that. And another one, which
the only problem with the Freddy movies is that towards the end it just becomes like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and the character becomes goofier and goofier and goofier.
Right.
You know, I mean, it got one step closer to becoming a cartoon character, you could even say. But then they gave Freddy his own show, Freddy's Nightmares, where he hosted it like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. And another one having its official 50th anniversary next Friday, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I saw in the theater last night. It was wonderful.
Which you can actually stay in that house.
You can. It's a restaurant, a barbecue restaurant.
A restaurant and a bed and breakfast as well.
Yeah, they took apart the house and moved it 20 miles to save it. And it's odd because the location where the house actually was is still there. A bunch of stuff was developed around it, but that lot is still empty, and the old street that Sally escapes on is still there. I guess they weren't sure if they were, because it's not a park. They just left it abandoned. You can see the old watering hole from the movie that's still next to it. So I guess whatever plan they had for that particular portion of the lot didn't go through, or maybe they had to dig it up for pipes. I don't know. But anyway, I like that ending is also a bit fatalistic, because even though Texas Chainsaw Massacre is really the first movie to put up the final girl aspect of horror, she doesn't kill the monster. Like, Leatherface makes it, as does the cook and Grandpa. I mean, granted, the hitchhiker does get run over, and it was he was like a really funny character. But, you know, Leatherface gets away, and it's like, oh God, the possibility that people like that are out there, because it's based on a guy and a real person.
Yeah.
And the enemy in that movie, you could argue, is...
Matter of fact, that's the next thing that Netflix is doing. Ed Gein.
Yeah.
But I also I just wanted to say that if you want great audio commentaries, listen to the Big Trouble in Little China audio commentary, and then The Thing, because John Carpenter and Kurt Russell do the thing together, and it's like you're sitting there with friends on a Friday or Saturday afternoon and just bullshitting with them.
Yeah.
And it's great. But what was I going to say? No, I forgot.
And it's like in Texas Chainsaw, the villain is kind of automations. That's what put them all out of work, and why they've been forced to scrap by on raiding tourists who come by and that kind of thing. Is obviously that little gas station the cook owns doesn't get much business, and that's why I think the cook was telling the truth when he said they were out of gas, because they need the money. He would have been more than happy to sell them gasoline if they had it, because obviously Leatherface didn't like them stumbling around the house. And that's another thing. Back then, they put thought into the characters, because Leatherface wasn't really a monster. He's a mentally disabled guy who's freaking out because these people keep breaking into his house. And he knows his father's going to beat him if he lets any of them get away after he killed the first guy, which is why he goes out into the dark, and or why he grabs the lady who was trying to escape from the house, and why he goes out in the dark looking for the other two with his chainsaw.
Which is why Pearl and X had that.
And he does get beaten when his father comes home and sees, look what your brother did to the door, and he's just beating him with a broomstick. So it's like there's actual depth to the character and a method to the madness, which I liked about old monster movies like that. And granted, London After Midnight is not really a monster movie, even though, yes, you have, Lon Chaney dressing up as, Inspector Burke dressing up as the man in the beaver hat, but he is kind of monstrous as a character. And that was an interesting mystery. And that again, is a token of a pre-Dracula film. And what I mean by that is Dracula was one of the first horror films that had an overtly supernatural villain. Like what usually movies like before that, like London After Midnight, the creepy supernatural monster stuff turned out to be a fake out. Like it wasn't, it wasn't actually vampires or werewolves. It was just somebody dressing up, or it was the Scooby-Doo effect, if you will. But Dracula in 1931 was like the first time where it's like, no, we're going to embrace the supernatural aspect of it. So I would think it'd be interesting if they were to remake this movie, but add an actual supernatural element to it. You know, like, hey, where'd you get the idea to dress up like the man in the beaver hat? Like, what is that based on? And he's like, oh, I wasn't dressed up as the man in the beaver hat this time. You know, you have like an actual person or something like
right. That. Or you do it where they think it's the man in the beaver hat, but then it turns out, as he's saying, you know, you think it's him, and then you see the real supernatural entity right at that same time, and it's like, it wasn't me, you know, something like that.
Right.
But the thing I remember what I was going to say was, I saw a fascinating thing, a little clip online yesterday, where someone asked Bruce Campbell about Ash versus Freddy versus Jason. He goes, there were talks about that, and it went like this. Hello, new line. Yeah, we'd like to do Ash versus Freddy versus Jason. Okay. And then, you know, Ash kills Freddy and Jason. And they're like, click. Like, they stopped talking about it. They didn't want to do it because those are two characters that need to come back and need to come back. But, you know, someone pointed out, well, they get killed in those films and they still come back. And goes, yeah, I know, but apparently the studio didn't want to do that. I mean, but then again, like if you go online to those script vaults that are online, there are like dozens of different versions of that Freddy versus Jason film. Like there are about like 9 different copies of it.
It's sort of like when John Carpenter came up with the idea to do the sequel to The Thing. He was going to do it around 2004, and he said he would explain away Kurt Russell and Keith David having aged by saying, oh, frostbite or whatever, and it would have been great. But the studio didn't want to front the money because his latest films had, you know, that stupid bean counter logic. Oh, his latest movies haven't really been making much money, so he must not be very good at his job. You know, that type of crap, which I just can't stand. Right. But it would have been great. And another great legacy of this film, arguably the biggest legacy, is that Gene Simmons of Kiss says his costume, which opens up like bat wings and he spreads around, is directly based on the man in the beaver hat from London After Midnight. Which is pretty cool. And the name of the film is also the name of a Gothic, London Gothic.
After Midnight, yeah.
Yeah, London After Midnight, which is great. And I like the title in general because it's like, what is this? Doesn't really seem to take place in London. It seems to like because we're not really, we don't know if there were establishing shots or what. It's because like I said, it's like outside this big manor house. You see the big courtyard with the beautiful weeping willows or plants and everything, and it's like. Is this like the weird shit that happens in London after midnight?
I mean, like you watch Frankenstein, you watch Dracula, and it all takes place in like Germany or something like that.
Yeah. And
everybody has a British accent. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait, what? No one has a German accent. It's like, but yeah, I mean, it's like I said, to appreciate movies today, like especially the horror movies. You have to appreciate the originals that came before, the old horror films, like the films that you wouldn't expect to see. Yes. I watched one a few weeks ago. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like had to do with someone getting murdered, and that's right. What's his name? The guy who played Frankenstein, Boris Karloff, was in it.
Yeah,
and he believed that when he died. He would go to some sarcophagus and he would be reborn, and he dies with this crystal in his hand, and he tied the crystal in his hand. Someone breaks into the vault, takes the crystal. He comes back to life and is chasing people down. He's not even in that film for a long period of time. And all it is about these people going, well, they want this crystal. He wants this crystal. They're doing this and that. And it's a little bit of a mess. But it's a very interesting film. I think it was one of those films back then that could have used a few more passes at the script. But like the Boris Karloff characters in bed, and by his bed up against the wall is this giant sarcophagus of like Anubis or something like that. It's really a weird film.
Yeah, that's kind of like what Bela Lugosi thought when he was playing the role of the occultist in the remake of London After Midnight, Mark of the Vampire. And he's like, this is the logic behind this, the inspector going to all this trouble to get a confession, this is kind of weird. And it's like, yeah, maybe the script needed a few more passes, which is why it'd be great to do a modern retelling. I think the closest thing we have on film to the Man in the Beaver Hat would be sort of Dr. Caligari from the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, because he's like similar stout size of the big beaver hat, hunched over. And then more recently, you know, the Penguin from Batman Returns kind of looks similar, giving that type of vibe of that old Victorian type, creepy thing that you definitely feel that. And as you mentioned, the Babadook, that's another direct reference. So I would love to see this character and this idea make a comeback for a movie like a Robert Eggers. And it's interesting because Robert Eggers says that he is only interested in making movies set in like, Victorian era or ancient or beforehand. He's not interested in making modern based films.
Right.
So we could get, if this Nosferatu turns out to be successful, maybe we could get some reimaginings of some other classic horrors.
Yeah.
Like that.
Like that the trailer for Nosferatu looks amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really looks amazing, but it doesn't give a lot away.
Yeah.
And I bet you he had a hand in that, going, look, if I'm directing this and I'm doing this, when we do the trailers, we're not giving a lot away.
Well, I know he was upset about how his last film got handled in distribution and stuff, because it ended up getting like barely any distribution and then dumped on streaming. The Northman.
The Northman, yeah.
That was another great film. I got that on 4K as well. Let's see. The Dead Man chimes in. He says, I watched Memoirs of an Invisible Man last night, and I'll take the Incredible Man original, or the Invisible, I think it means Invisible Man original over that. Yeah.
I actually read the book, Memoirs of an Invisible Man. It's a pretty good book. But, I mean, I remember going and seeing that. My mother took me to see Memoirs of an Invisible Man because I wanted to see it.
Yeah.
And she took me to see it, and I liked it. You know, I believe I have it digitally. It's been a while since I watched it, but I mean, you gotta admit, I mean, special effects in that film, that was right before CGI became really, really big.
Yeah.
You know, so it's still good, but it's, then again, you know, there are problems with Chevy Chase on that film. You know, John Carpenter didn't like working with him.
Yeah, that's one I still have not seen. But lately, I have been watching a lot of old horror. Like I watched A House of Wax with Vincent Price the other night. I'm like, that's really good. That one holds up. That itself in 1953 was a remake of a film called Mystery of the Wax Museum in 1933, which was more of a mystery as opposed to a horror film, even though it was the same reveal in the end, the same story.
The film that hasn't held up is The Blob, the original Blob, where every kid who's supposedly getting ready to graduate high school and go to college look like they're about 35.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm surprised though for the original that it was in color. That was actually, I'm like, oh wow, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I have it, and it's a great little B movie.
It is. It's excellent. It's everybody knows The Blob, you know.
And I think they're trying to do another remake of The Blob. If I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that one, but I hear they want to, which, you know, you got to tread careful with that one.
Yeah. And then the makeup that Vincent Price had for his character in The House of Wax was also pretty good. Even though you could definitely tell it was him under the makeup, that was a very interesting kind of, you know, macabre design.
That's right. We recommend the original House of Wax, not the one with Paris Hilton.
Yeah, that isn't even, that's not even the same story. They just borrowed the name because they were lazy and they just wanted to tread on the original. It's like, no.
Well, you know, it's sort of like how they can't do Back to the Future. They can do Back to the Future.
That was made by the guy who made Jungle Cruise, by the way, who did The House of Wax with Paris Hilton.
Really?
Lom Colette Sarah, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm probably butchering the name, but that's the same guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I like the remake of House on Haunted Hill. I enjoyed that one for Jeffrey Rush doing a Vincent Price impression, which is, they really need to. They really should have done a Vincent Price biopic, and Jeffrey Rush should have played him because he really did look and sound like Vincent Price.
Yeah, his son is still around too, professor in New Mexico. But Vincent. Yeah, he was great, and of course, absolutely adored by Tim Burton for his
Yeah,
film.
and Vincent Price was also a connoisseur of food. He had a cookbook as well. He was a gourmet cook.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's Gilbert Godfrey's podcast. They interviewed Vincent Price's daughter. Like there's like a whole slew of like Halloween type interviews. They interviewed for one show Vincent Price's daughter, uh, Boris Karloff's daughter, Bela Lugosi's son, who is a lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah, so they go into that, and also Kirk Hammett, who is from Metallica, is a huge Universal Monster fan,
Mm.
and I think he even wrote a book about it,
Mm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Cool. Yes, I just like. Yeah, I love these old like horror. I wish we could get back to something like that. It seems like once Psycho came out, there was a bit of a, for a while, there was a deviation and obsession with taking things out of the gothic monsters and all of that to doing more human-based horror. But then, of course, we had that guys like Leatherface and Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees come along.
Which, by the way, that's one of the greatest films is the making of Psycho film, the Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins.
I saw that. That was okay. I like that. Yeah.
I mean, he really looked like Hitchcock. I mean, he got it down pretty good of looking like him. He didn't want to go into a deep impression of him, but he really did look like him. And I love the nod at the end to the birds. You know,
yes. That was funny.
It's great. I mean, it actually plays out like an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents in a way.
Mm. The dead man says Freddy was originally a child murderer, not a child molester, and the curse in the original was that Freddy was getting revenge on the parents. That's true. He was getting revenge on the parents. We just assume that, child murder, it's not much of a stretch to figure that might be what's going on.
I think that if they were going to redo A Nightmare on Elm Street, if you really want to get into it, you would do it with the Dream Warriors. Start there.
Mm.
Or even make that do like the first movie that introduces Freddy and things that he's done, and then towards the end you introduce the Dream Warriors, and then the next movie is full on Dream Warriors, and that's how you get into it.
Yeah, I remember seeing Dream Warriors once back in the 90s, but it had very striking visuals.
Yeah. The girl getting pulled into the TV, welcome to primetime, bitch. The girl being force-fed.
Yeah, see, the dead man follows up saying the child molester thing was in the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Okay, that's a way to make them more evil, but, child murder, child molester, it's like, yeah, we're kind of walking the same tightrope there with it. It's Psycho Freddy. I did not see the remake. I heard horrible things about it, but I don't know, I'll check it out maybe. It was Jackie Earle Haley playing the role that time.
But I do know that Robert Englund has said that if they were to remake Nightmare on Elm Street, he wants Kevin Bacon to play Freddy.
Really?
And yeah, he said that would be his choice they had to recast Freddy. He wants Kevin Bacon, which in a way would be so full circle for Kevin Bacon from going from Friday the 13th to Elm Street.
Yes. That'd be pretty cool. Kind of like how Bill Paxton is the only actor to get killed by a xenomorph, a predator, and a Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been a while since we've had a real new monster that's had a lasting impression on pop culture. So I wonder if it's time to go digging back into the archives and dig one up that maybe could have another shot, like the Man in the Beaver Hat.
Like I know we're getting James Wan doing The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which, I'm very interested in seeing how he pulls that off.
That's true. He'd be probably good for it. He does like doing, creature stuff. Dead Man says Kevin Bacon would have been great. Yeah, he probably would have been. And I assume at some point that franchise is going to get rebooted. Frankly, I'm surprised that, after, what was it, Nightmare 7, they didn't do any more with Robert Englund, and then after the remake failed, do you think they would have gone back to do another one by now with Robert Englund to bring him back? Because he's not like retired or anything.
Right. And if you go out there on YouTube, there are plenty of interviews with Robert Englund about playing Freddy and about his life and stuff like that. And they're fascinating, especially his interview with Michael Rosenbaum.
Yeah. There's a pretty great documentary film about that, actually.
What's it, Never Sleep Again?
That, I think, is about the franchise as a whole. This one is specifically about Robert Englund. Let me see. I have it listed.
Yeah, I've heard about it, I think.
It's called Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story.
Right.
It's 2 hours, 11 minutes, released last year, actually.
Which, not unlike Never Sleep Again, which is about 4.5 hours long.
Yeah, they've got Eli Roth, Adam Green, Tony Todd, Lance Henriksen, Heather Langenkamp, Lynn Shay, Bill Moseley, Kane Hodder, Theo Hughes. So they got a lot of people in on that for the the interviewees.
Which, by the way, Heather Langenkamp has now started going back. She started going out on the circuit of doing Comic-Cons. And she hadn't really been out there in a while because I don't think many people know this, but she lost her son. Her son died. I think her son had cancer or something like that, and he died. And for a while there, she took a step back from acting and stuff. So yeah, I mean, she went through that. I remember reading about that.
So I was mistaken. Robert Englund, after New Nightmare in 1994, did reprise the role for Freddy vs. Jason, which was 2003.
That's right.
And that was the last time he's played the character because I don't think Freddy vs. Jason was as successful as the studio was hoping it would be. And
because it made it, who won? Who won? Well, you can look at it this way: either Freddy won or Jason won.
Yeah, that's what I didn't like about those versus movies back in those days. It's like they would never commit to one side, winning. It's like, why don't you let one side win for the first movie, and then you can do a sequel and have the other guy win or something.
Right.
But Freddy vs. Jason was not a very good movie, and it didn't do well enough that they didn't come back with a sequel. And so.
But I mean, if you read the scripts for all the different scripts from Freddy vs. Jason, there's a lot of really cool things that they were going to do with that movie in some of those scripts. And it's like, if they would have just picked and took different things from those scripts and just added it into it. Like, I think there was one where it was going to take place in a mall or in hell or something like that. Yeah, there was going to be a fight and it took place in hell.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that could have been Freddy vs. Jason versus Pinhead. But yeah, they want all these characters to fight each other. And it's like, well, it's doing that.
I like that the studios cooperate by letting some of those versus movies happen, which is pretty cool.
Like to do the Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, where you end up getting Abbott and Costello. You get Frankenstein, Dracula, and then the Wolfman. Mm-hmm. And then as a surprise bonus at the end, you get the Invisible Man, who is played by Vincent Price.
That's right. And they also had another movie, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, and then Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. So they did a few of those.
Yeah, and I have all those.
They're
so much fun, those movies, though. And you look at that, and the fact that is the last time you will see Bela Lugosi playing.
It's crazy. It's to think that that's the last time. Here's something funny. Dead Man asks, "Where's the Canadian?" I assume you're referring to Scott. This is what happened.
Scott has been put on ice. He's up in Moose Jaw, and he fell in some ice, and he's frozen underwater. So,
as you probably know, The Dead Man, we were advertising. We were going to do both reviews of Phantom of the Opera 1925 and 1943 tonight. But after I had done my commitment and watched 3.5 hours of those films, Scott says, I got distracted. Some stuff came up. We'll have to postpone. I was very bitter and upset about that because he waited till the very end. Like, how can you get distracted? I always plan around my life to make sure this is here. I've even told friends, sorry, I can't hang out with you because I got to do this. Then I find out later tonight that oh, it wasn't getting distracted or being busy with things. He just went out to go get laid, or he tried. I'm like, oh, so you blew off your commitment so you could try and go get laid. And never mind me and dedicating this. And I was like, motherfucker. So I got really pissed.
But
which
who
is why
would like the post that you and I were doing the show tonight? Which,
right.
I'm like, because I was saying to someone tonight, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? I'm up at like 3 a.m. It's 4 a.m. here now.
Yeah.
Why am I doing a podcast this late at night? Because damn it, I love it.
Yes.
And because you needed someone and you don't let a friend down.
Yes, and I decided to do a podcast because in turn I didn't want to let our audience down because we promised a show. And I'm like, well, I'm going to bring you guys a show, even if Scott doesn't want to. So
the next time you see Scott, give him all the shit you can.
Yes, give Scott all the shit you can. That's for sure. And so that's why I also thought it would be kind of cheeky to pick a lost film, which we technically can't watch.
Right. So I'm like, what the hell? I was telling my friend, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm doing a podcast at 3 a.m. for a movie I can't even watch because it's been lost to time because of a fire. But, I wonder, after reading about the guy who killed his girlfriend after watching that movie, I wonder if that was the first case of someone blaming it on a film.
That's a good question. That's actually, that's a great, it might be. Man, that is really good. That would give it an extra seat at the table in horror.
I mean, you don't see many people going, well, I threw this child in the water because I watched Frankenstein. To see if the kid would float. So the flowers were floating. I saw this kid and I threw it in the water.
Oh, that's true.
And then he just drowns the kid, and I love that. And you just see him drowning the kid.
Jesus,
and from back then, you're like, this is a bit heavy for some movie from the 30s.
Well, it's a tragedy, and it's but that's another type of horror, which is interesting because it's not about trying to scare people. It's a horrible misunderstanding, which becomes like, oh God, sort of like in Hereditary when the kid gets decapitated. It's not like typical horror movie stuff. You feel, on the one hand, you feel so bad for the older brother, but you're so shocked at what happened.
Let's just bring up Hereditary for a moment here. That scene. Oh, I feel sick. Stick your head out the window.
Oh,
okay. Boom. And it's like, you can't stop thinking about that scene for the rest of the film. It's like you got PTSD from that shit. And then you get towards the end of that film where it just gets really fucked up. People getting decapitated, people getting set on fire, people, burning other people on fire. And it's like, what? This is, and of course me, I got to buy this movie Hereditary. I hear things are great about it. And I waited a while to watch it. And then one night I said, I'll put this on. I got nothing else to do. That movie disturbed the freak out of me. Like the only movie to really get to disturb me the most was the original Blair Witch, because it's that very end scene, and you're watching it and you can't tell if the kid that's in the corner, if he's floating or not floating, because he looks like he's floating. And the more and more my friend and I would think about it, the more it would freak us out. And we'd be like, oh.
I think Toni Collette should have totally won an Oscar for Hereditary. She was so good at that. That's totally Academy being biased towards horror as a genre. But I remember seeing ads for...
The Academy is biased towards stunts. But then again, who knows? Maybe they'll put the Fall Guy up for, say, look, we want this to go up for an Oscar about stunts.
That's true. Because I know that SAG, Screen Actors Guild, now offers stunt ensemble awards, which is pretty cool.
Well, I want to say, Dead Man, about RM. She has been working her ass off. She travels for work. And the last time I spoke to her, she was in Atlanta, and they had to buckle down for that hurricane because no one can travel in a hurricane. But she's okay. She's okay. And she always wants me to let everybody know that she sends her best. It's just that she's busy with work.
Yeah. It also means like us too as well, because we used to be on Rob's channel quite a lot in terms of you know, when he had his call-ins for Midnight Metal or the Midnighter, and he didn't really do that anymore.
Which, by the way, guys, Rob's 1,000th episode is coming up, and if you email him, you get, I think, 30 minutes with him, and he's making the entire 1,000 episode about the viewers, and it's going to be 16 hours long. And I wrote in the chat tonight, Rob, you better pay me for 16 hours if you want me to moderate that sucker. Either that or you could pay me in Blu-rays. Thank you very much. Because if you think I'm going to sit there for 16 hours, you're nuts. But some of them will be, I think some of them are going to be pre-recorded, but a lot of them, yeah, he wants to bring people on. And someone went, oh, you mean like a member chat?
Yeah, I think the longest Zoom call I was on was like 12 hours, and that was before we knew about StreamYards having this workaround to be on for free.
Yeah, I used to do Zooms, and I would bring Rob on, and we'd be on 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, and it'd be so much fun. It would just be, just a private Zoom, and Rob would tell us stories that, he really can't tell on the air that would probably get him canceled or sued. But then one night he showed us the elusive Moonraker commentary he did, his drunk Moonraker commentary, which was amazing. So I remember he announced that. He goes, I'll show it to you guys. And just to watch Scott and Kat, their jaws drop to the floor.
Yeah.
Like, what? You're going to what? And it was the best. Like, Rob is great. When you get to talk to him and you get that time, he really tells some great stories.
Now, I thought I'd do something crazy before we get out of here. I'm going to give this movie that we couldn't watch a rating. I'm going to give it.
How many beavers would you give it?
I give it 3.5 out of 5 beavers because I did enjoy the reconstruction. It was paced pretty well. Just, again, having to do all those mental gymnastics at the end to figure out the plot logic was a bit much, but it was still entertaining.
Yeah, I did not get to watch it because I was busy moderating Rob's show. But I would say for effort on finding stills, which no one knows where they came from and, whatnot, I'd give it about a 5 for that. Out of 10, I'd give it a 5 because that's giving it some, effort into at least trying to assemble something.
I'll hypnotize you. Stare into the skull, and you will become mesmerized and give it a rating, and you will remember the whole movie. And tomorrow you will forget that Rob had a channel, and you will take over the channel. Oh yeah, the dead man says that he remembers Ladies of the Peach. Yes. I remember doing a couple reviews with RM and Cameron Shaw on there, and those were pretty great. I miss that guy. We had a lot of fun. But yeah, maybe, who knows? We can get stuff going.
When she gets, not so busy anymore, but because they required everybody to go into work, and she travels for work. Like, I would say over the summer she spent like maybe 2 months in the Pacific.
That's right. And Rob's been really busy lately too because of his True Noir.
Which, by the way, if you haven't, go to Kickstarter, look up True Noir. You can still pre-order the episodes, and playing the main character of and the thing is Michael Rosenbaum. They've gotten Michael Rosenbaum to play Nathan Heller. And he's got a great cast. Michael Rosenbaum, Curtis Armstrong, Anthony LaPaglia, who was in one of my favorite movies, the one about the vampires with that John Landis did, and Innocent Something. Yeah. Like, I love that movie because Don Rickles, and it's like what? And you see Don Rickles turn into like a vampire or something like that, and it's like, this is crazy. Don Rickles is in it, and it's the most craziest thing watching him turn into a vampire. But yeah, you got Michael Rosenbaum, Anthony LaPaglia. He's got a couple guys from The Sopranos in it. The guy who played big pussy. Rob loves to say that. No clue why. But yeah, he's got Katie Sackhoff in it as well. So yeah, he's got a really good thing. And there, if you're in New York later this month, I believe they're gonna premiere the first episode or maybe the first 2 episodes at Comic-Con. New York Comic-Con.
Oh, thank you very, very much, the Dead Man. Here's some money, lady of the PGS. Thank you, Dead Man. Very much appreciated. As while we may not be in London after midnight, this is Phantasmagorium after midnight.
Yeah, there you go. That's what this episode should have been called.
Yes.
Phantasmagorium after midnight.
Yeah, Cat and Tom's chats. Which we could always do more. Perhaps at a more reasonable hour for Tom.
Yeah, the hell with Scott. The hell with Scott, and let him. We all know he wasn't getting laid. He was watching Pornhub. Let's just put it where it is. He was watching Pornhub and trying to hide from his parents.
Yes, and so that is great. But perhaps to accommodate East Coasters, next time we'll do it so it would be midnight Tom's time and not over here, maybe. So to make it more reasonable.
So everybody, like half the panel doesn't look like they're ready to drop dead.
Yeah, and I'll pick a movie that we can actually watch, like maybe House of Wax or something.
Yeah, and there's some like I have all the original Fly films, like from the first one with Vincent Price all the way up to what's his name, Eric Stoltz.
Mm.
Those are great films as well.
They are. Well, we've been going for over an hour, and we're tired, and it is Phantasmagorium After Midnight with our review of London After Midnight, the lost film which nobody can see.
Join the show next time, whether or not we find out where the hell is Scott.
Yes, we will.
Until then, I'm Tom Jr. Jackson.
And I am the man in the beaver hat. Scrolling and looking for the show outro to see if we actually have one. I don't think we will, so I'm just going to play this.
That was good.